Yeah, this was one of the craziest seasons I've ever seen.
Die right now!
And I'm not gonna lie, it low-key messed me up, but at the same time, this was one of the best anime seasons I've seen in a long time, and the moment I really became a fan of this show. And ever since then, I've just been waiting for the season to finally drop. So today, I binge watched the entire season with two goals in mind. First, I wanted to see how they follow up the Shibuya Incident, because after everything that happened, there's no way the season could just go back to normal. But second, I wanted to understand what this story is really building towards. So with that in mind, I went into the new season. Coming out of the last season, my head was all over the place. What was Kenjaku's plan? What was going on in the scene? Is Yuta really coming after Yuji? And how are they going to get Gojo back? These questions were sitting with me for a long time, and going into season 3, they were the first things that came rushing back. So I knew one thing for sure, this season was going to be hype. However, I didn't think it would open like this. Oh snap. What the heck? What is happening? This completely threw me off, and I definitely didn't fully understand what was going on in this scene. At first, I thought it was just the aftermath of him killing some curses, but once I rewatched this scene, it finally hit me. It had nothing to do with the curses, and everything to do with Yuji, the guilt he feels, and the weight of everything that happened in Shibuya, especially when Sukuna took over. And in one opening scene, the season tells you exactly what it is. It was about the aftermath of what happened. And this was the first sign of that, something I'll definitely come back to later. But even outside of Yuji, you can see it in the world itself. The city feels abandoned and full of curses. Whatever Kenjaku did, it clearly changed everything. And before you even have time to settle into that, Yuta shows up. This whole sequence just works. It throws you straight back into the story, while somehow making everything feel even more dangerous than before. Dude, what is happening? There's no way they start the season off like this. And as much as I was already loving where this was going, it only got better. So let's talk about first impressions, starting with Yuji. From the jump, you can feel how different he is. We saw it in the opening scene, and we see it more here. He's walking down the stairs over and over, but never actually reaches the bottom. And again, at first I wasn't sure what this meant, but how I look at it now is that this was the loop. Yuji being trapped by his own guilt and never finding the bottom, never finding that relief. And what breaks that cycle is Choso just talking to him, reassuring him. And once that happens, he finally makes it to the bottom. And that told me everything about who Choso was. Because going into the season, I didn't know much about Choso beyond the fact that he didn't like Yuji. But the moment you see how he shows up for Yuji here, it becomes clear what kind of character he actually is. Someone who protects the people he cares about, while also walking ahead so the people behind him don't have to carry everything alone. And because of that, it made this fight hit a lot harder. This fight was insane. The visuals, the choreography, all of it was just on another level. And as good as the action was, what really made this fight so good to me was the dynamic between both these characters. On one side you got Choso, someone whose entire identity so far is built around family. And on the other, you've got Naya, someone who clearly operates in a completely different world, where status matters more than connection, and legacy and power are the only things worth protecting. And that contrast really elevated the fight for me. There's this line from Choso about what it actually means to be an older brother, that their role is to walk ahead, to set the path for the younger siblings to follow. And as someone who has both an older and younger siblings, that line stuck with me. And it also changed how I saw Choso. It turned him from a cool character to a really relatable person I could easily root for, and because of that, it made watching him win so satisfying. What the heck? I hadn't talked about Yuta yet, but he's an absolute force in this season. Way more than I expected, to be honest. I already knew he was strong, but I didn't realize just how strong until right here. The fact that he's immediately being compared to Gojo, that alone told me everything. And once he starts going after Yuji, I already knew how this was gonna end. There's no way Yuji wins this. So naturally, I was waiting for something, someone, to save him. An interruption, anything, but it never came.
I'm alive.
What is happening?
But how?
Is he not?
Oh, thank goodness.
What is going on? So far, this show has done a great job on keeping me on my toes the entire time. We get the reveal that Yuta was never truly trying to kill Yuji, at least not in the way I thought. And learning that Gojo played a role in this, it made me curious about the relationship between him and Yuta, and I really want to see more of that explored. But more importantly, this is where the season's true mission starts to become clear. Megumi asked Yuji for help to save his sister from the culling games, and out of that whole exchange, one moment really hit me.
What happened to Kugisaki?
Ooh.
I see. All right. All right, I understand.
That hurt, man. That hurt seeing that. I'm not gonna lie, when they hinted she might still be alive, I wanted to believe it. So hearing that she didn't make it, that actually hurt. And when you stack that on top of Nanami, Yuji has lost so much. How much more can this character actually take? How much further are the culling games going to push him? That question followed me into everything that came next. But before any of that, the season had to explain what we were actually walking into. This entire episode is basically dedicated to one thing, explaining the culling games, and I'm not gonna pretend like I caught everything on my first watch. Yo, I'm gonna need a breakdown after watching this. This episode throws a lot at you. The rules, the colonies, the point system, the stakes, all of it at once, and it did feel like a lot in the moment. But despite all of that, one thing was crystal clear. Whatever the culling games are, it has the potential to change everything. There's no going back to what the story was before this, and it all starts with Tengen. From design alone, this character immediately grabs you. He doesn't look like anyone else in the show, and beyond how he looks, his entire existence just raises questions. What did he used to look like? How much has he already changed? And what actually happens to him if Kenjaku's plan succeeds? Then there's this detail I caught after going back. When Tengen greets everyone in the room, he specifically acknowledges 5 people, even though there are 6 present, and the one person he skips is Yuki. Now once I noticed that, and connected it to what her technique is called, Star Rage, my brain immediately connected it with the Star Plasma Vessel, and the way she interacts with Tengen, it all started feeling like it meant something. Could Yuki have once been connected to Tengen, a former vessel that went wrong, or does her ability tie back to him in some way? I could be reaching completely, but it genuinely feels like there's history between these two. But once the roles are finally laid out, and everyone begins moving toward their own separate objectives, the real game is finally about to begin. But before the story jumps into that, there are still a few major consequences from the past that the story has to address first. I said earlier I'd come back to how Shibuya affected characters. Well, this is that moment. By this point in the season, it was already clear that Shibuya left a lot of things broken, especially the characters. And as much as I was ready to move forward into the culling games, there was still one major thing the story had to deal with first: the damage. I like to think of this stretch of episodes as the 3 responses to the past. Everyone here is forced to confront what happened, just in very different ways. And the first major example of that is Maki. Not only does she have the physical scars from Shibuya, she still has something arguably worse waiting for her clan. From the moment she arrives, it's clear that nothing has changed. Naya disrespects her immediately, her mother feels emotionally distant, and her own father is willing to kill both her and Mai without hesitation. And going back to what I mentioned earlier about Naya, and how disconnected he felt from everything Choso stood for, that prioritization of status over actual connection, Naya wasn't an exception. The whole Zenin clan seems to share the same mentality, legacy over everything, even their own daughters. And in the middle of all of that, the only thing that kept Maki from dying was the one bond that actually meant something: Mai.
I've known for a long time now why twins are considered to be such an unfortunate accident by Jujutsu sorcerers. Even if you don't have any techniques, it's pointless if I have one. So long as I exist, Maki, you will always be incomplete.
Hey, I get it!
This is all I'll leave you with. Cast off the rest. Just promise me one thing. Please. Destroy everything.
All of it, you hear?
This whole reveal was crazy to me. The idea that Mai was unintentionally holding Maki back just by existing because of the nature of their twin connection is such a devastating concept. For Maki to become who she needed to be, it was always going to cost her the one person she still had. And watching that play out, watching Mai make that choice while Maki completely breaks down, that got me. This whole sequence genuinely gave me chills. But what came after, I was not ready for at all. This was so good. The animation alone was some of the best the series has produced, probably since the Maharaga fight. But beyond how it looked, what made this sequence hit so hard was what it meant. This was Maki's answer to the clan that never wanted her, to the family that was willing to kill her, to every scar she carried out of Shibuya. She burned it all to the ground, and it was one of the most satisfying things I've watched all season. But Maki's answer was only the first one, because while her response was about complete destruction, Yaga represented something very different.
Thing is not your nephew. It's just a vessel with your nephew's information.
Are you trying to tell me that I can't live in the present if I stay hung up on the dead, forever living in the past? Well, my little sister can no longer live in the past. She needs to live in the present, meaning with Takeru.
Masamichi? I think that lady's my mother, isn't she?
That's right.
Yeah, I had a feeling that's who she was.
This scene really stood out to me. Going into it, I already knew Yaga had been marked for death after Shibuya. That was established. So on paper, this should have been a tragic ending for a character I liked, but it didn't feel like that. It almost felt symbolic. Something I didn't understand until I started writing this. Yaga's cursed corpse technique, at least in this moment, was a metaphor. It's about taking something that's been lost and finding a way to keep it alive, rebuilding a connection that the world already moved past. And that realization completely reframed the scene for me, where Maki's response was destruction, burning away everything that hurt her. Yaga's response was preservation, holding on to what's gone. And then he tells this guy how to create a cursed corpse, and he calls it a curse. And I don't think he meant the technique. I think he meant the burden of it, because that's what he's passing on, the curse of holding on. And what makes this response feel so different from Maki's is that it doesn't look painful from the outside, but underneath that, the cost is still the same. You can't keep pouring everything into the past without it eventually consuming what's left of you. And that's exactly what made me so uncertain about Yuji, because at this point, he's carrying more than either of them. And after watching Maki and Yaga, I genuinely didn't know what his answer was going to be. Would he break under it? Would he lash out like Maki? Would he end up like Yaga? Or somehow find a third way through? This whole section of trying to talk to Hikari was exactly what I needed after everything that came before it. So watching everything here was just fun. And while the fight itself was okay, the part that really hooked me was this conversation. It's animated so well. The way the characters moved felt genuinely realistic, and it made the whole thing feel alive in a way that's hard to explain. And then there's this moment. Is he not gonna answer that phone? Obviously, I had no idea why he was just letting the phone ring, but that's what made the reveal so fun. The fact that the girl was secretly using it to signal danger was such a clean detail. And on top of that, Hikari immediately clocking that Yuji should know Gojo. Yeah, I just love stuff like that. It tells you so much about who Hikari is without explaining anything. Already he seems to be very sharp, but beyond how fun all of this was, this is where Yuji's path finally becomes clear. We've already talked about the guilt he feels, and now he's standing in front of someone like Hikari, someone driven almost entirely by passion, and the contrast between the two is super obvious. Where Hikari feels alive, Yuji on the other hand feels like the complete opposite. It feels like he's lost that spark that he had in season 1, and yet, despite all of that, Yuji still chooses to move forward. He doesn't lash out like Maki, and he doesn't cling to a past like Yaga. Instead, he just accepts what he is right now, a cog, and a cog doesn't get to stop. It just keeps turning, keeps doing what it's there to do. So he stands there and takes Hikari's punches over and over, because he understands that if he's going to keep moving, if he's going to keep fulfilling that role, he needs this. He needs Hikari. And seeing that mindset shift from Yuji was crazy. It seems like Yuji has reduced himself down to purpose alone, deciding that if he can't heal right now, then he'll just keep moving until he can. And I think that's one of the most realistic portrayals of trauma this show has done, because in a season so heavily focused on trauma, it shows us we don't always take the time to heal. Sometimes it just looks like getting up and continuing anyways.
Ding dong! Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong!
And just like that, the culling games finally begins. And right away, this feels like an entirely new dynamic for the show. There are new players everywhere, new threats, new alliances, and a ton of new characters I was already curious about. Okay. But honestly, the whole structure of this is so creative. Once Yuji and Megumi enter, they're instantly separated, dropped into completely different areas, literally falling out the sky, while other players are already positioned to hunt weaker participants for easy points. I think the most creative aspect about all of this, how it feels a little bit like a video game, and I feel like that's going to play a huge part in the story, possibly forcing these characters to make decisions they wouldn't otherwise make. And that alone would definitely make this arc just that much more engaging. But already, one of my favorite moments from the early parts of the games was this.
You can get killed while trying to find a reason to fight.
In that case, I gave Itadori bad advice. Gopher. They would have killed me at some point.
Where exactly can I find Higuruma?
Okay, fine. I'll give you a rough idea of where we're going. Higuruma's in
Higuruma's in Ikebukuro.
Shinjuku.
Got it?
Got it?
Dang. The split in the road. I genuinely thought this scene was done incredibly well. You've got Yuji and Megumi, both placing their trust in complete strangers, and the subtle visual details here are very good. The girl Megumi is following goes one direction, the person Yuji is following goes another, and once they each give their answers, it becomes clear someone lied. But what really makes this scene work is that the tension doesn't actually come from figuring out who lied, because if you're paying attention, it's pretty obvious Yuji's guide was telling the truth. No, the real tension is the separation, because the moment they split, my immediate thought was, where's Megumi being taken, and what is waiting for him when he gets there? I've said a few times throughout this video that the show does certain things very well, but this episode specifically is one of those moments where I have to stop and actually give it its credit. Because on my first watch, I didn't catch everything it was doing, but when I went back, it hit completely different. Higuruma is someone who genuinely wanted to do right, to protect people, to be the person standing between the defenseless and a system that doesn't always care about them. That's what being a defense lawyer meant to him. But the problem is, the system isn't always fair. In case after case, we watch that reality slowly hollow him out, and so we see him now broken in his ideals. Then the episode cuts to Yuji, and we see him helping someone vulnerable. And at first, it just felt like another Yuji moment. We've seen scenes like this before. But then there's this line, the mention that Higuruma has already beaten the helicopter guy before. And that's the moment it all clicked for me. Because that guy is exactly the kind of person Higuruma built his entire career fighting against. Someone who sees vulnerability as an opportunity. And even after everything that broke him, Higuruma's anger is still pointed at injustice. That part of him never left. And then Yuji says he'll be fine. And I don't think that's a throwaway line. Because Yuji, someone carrying an almost unbearable amount of pain, might be the only person in this entire situation who is actually capable of reaching Higuruma, and the idea only gets more interesting once the fight starts. Look at what confiscation actually does. It strips people of their power, making them defenseless, vulnerable, and paired with his courtroom-like judgment, it really shows just how much he's changed. He's taken everything he once stood for and flipped it, a direct product of his broken ideals. But then Yuji does something completely unexpected. He confesses. He says he did it, and that changes everything. Because why would Yuji confess, knowing Sukuna actually did it? It makes no sense. And Higuruma knows it. He knows this isn't fair, which is exactly the thing he spent his entire career fighting against. But what finally reaches him is that Yuji still blames himself. He says it was his fault, that he was too weak to stop it. And that response is something Higuruma has never seen before. Because every client that was found guilty gave him nothing but resentment, the cold stares. But Yuji's response was so different from everybody else's that I think it really hit him here. You can see it when he pauses, and then he says, "I see." In that moment, moment, Higuruma remembers who he used to be, someone who wanted to protect people crushed by things outside of their control. And Yuji is exactly that. So he sits down with Yuji and gives him his points. And after going back and piecing all of this together, this became one of the best episodes of the season for me. And it had nothing to do with the action, but because of how deliberate every detail was placed.
Besides, if I stay with you, I'm likely to hate myself even more. Sorry, I'm not criticizing you. See you later.
Which one of us will get crushed first?
And while all of that was happening with Yuji, Megumi was on the other side of that split, and I was still sitting there with that question from earlier. What exactly did that girl lead him into? And the answer was Reggie. Reggie immediately came off as clever and very manipulative, which made him fascinating, because his actual technique on paper isn't that impressive, like, at all. But that's kind of the point. He's a perfect matchup for Megumi specifically, because one thing I've noticed across this show is that Yuji's fights tend to be more emotionally driven, whereas Megumi's fights usually feels way more strategic, and this fight was the clearest example of that dynamic I've seen yet.
Chimera Shadow Garden.
From the opening exchanges, all the way through the domain expansion, to the reveal that Megumi had been sitting on his trump card the entire time, this fight was incredibly satisfying to watch, and it made Megumi feel like a genuine powerhouse for the first time in, honestly, a long time. And a lot of that credit goes to Reggie, because the way he used his technique throughout the fight, especially that entire sequence with the cars inside the domain, it kept the tension alive all the way through, to the point where both of them are being crushed under increasing weight, and the only question left is, who breaks first? And by the time this fight wrapped up, there was still this girl. And I'd be lying if I said a part of me wasn't waiting for Megumi to do something about that. But instead, he stops. He seemingly hears his sister, and then collapses. And the angel they've been searching for finally appears. And I don't know if I'm reading too far into this, but my immediate reaction was, is that his sister? Nah. Yeah, the angel's not his sister, right? Is there a possibility that the angel they were supposed to find is Megumi's sister, or at least has something to do with her? That question hasn't left me, and I don't think it will until next season answers it. Going into the final episode, after everything I'd already seen from Yuta this season, I was excited to see more of him. However, what I got was way more than I expected. Right from the start, the episode throws him straight into it. This massive cockroach curse shows up, and at first, it's a cool fight, but I already knew how it was going to end. Yeah, you should be able to take that. Yeah. Yuta is very capable. That much was clear. However, this episode does something very clever. It uses this fight as a setup. He chooses not to rely too heavily on reverse curse technique, and he avoids using Rika right away. And so when he takes damage, it raises the stakes for everything that follows.
A strike?
One thing I really noticed this season is just how much more creative the abilities have become. Uro's powers are incredibly unique, and that immediately made me more curious about these reincarnated sorcerers as a whole. And even though I didn't fully understand the history between her and Yuta at this point, it was obvious there was tension there. But before that dynamic can develop, a new challenger has shown himself. This is hard.
Can't you fight without blowing up everything around you?
Oh, but that won't satisfy my hunger, Akotsu.
Instantly, you understand exactly who this guy is. The smile after a clash, the confidence you see on his face, and the sheer excitement radiating off of him. I immediately understood that he loves to fight. But despite that he clearly loves every second of this, he's still unsatisfied. Like the fight is the meal, and he's looking for the dessert to finally feel enough. And I loved that about him. Very quickly, he became my favorite antagonist of the season. A little side note, but it also made me think about how Gege would write someone like Goku. But as all of this keeps building, Yuta keeps getting pushed. He's already been through multiple opponents. He's getting tired. Both Ryu and Uro keep coming back. And for a moment, it feels like Yuta might actually be approaching his limits. But that's until...
Come to me, Rika.
it's clear that everyone is going all out. And what makes this fight so good is that every person in it is fighting for a completely different reason. You have Yuta fighting against the clock, Uro is carrying something personal into this, and Ryu is finally getting what he's been looking for, all layered on top of each other at the same time, all culminating into this moment. Oh my god.
Quit your whining! Because at this point,
This is Domain?
words are meaningless! Domain expansion!
Yeah, I don't say this lightly, but that is the greatest single shots this series has ever produced. Visually, it captures exactly what this fight is. 3 domains, and 3 completely different wills, and somehow it still gets better. I've heard this from someone else, but I'll repeat it here. There's nothing better a show can do than play the opening in a fight. Wait, what?
Atta boy! Let's keep this dinner party going!
Slide.
Granite blast!
Oh my god, never mind.
Had already recovered.
He's using Uro's technique.
Dang.
This is what it's like to deserve. What does he mean?
He copied.
Was that my technique? I see.
Oh
You sent
my.
it sailing back to me, using Uro's technique. Thank you, Okutsu. I'm full now.
Yeah, that was peak. And by the end of it all, the sequence delivered on every level. And I'm genuinely glad that both of these characters made it out, because both of them feel like characters the story still has a lot to do with. And so far they're just great characters overall. But what stayed with me the most was the ending to this episode. Those final shots, the return of more ancient sorcerers, that haunting shot of Sukuna, and the feeling that something catastrophic is still coming. And Uro's words describing the calamity ahead lands like a warning the whole season has been building toward, because this entire season has been about the aftermath, about how these characters keep moving forward. And so the ending makes one thing clear: if this season was about learning how to carry the past, then what comes next might be what finally breaks them. I don't usually do this, but thanks for watching. If you like what you saw here, consider checking out my Patreon, where you can access my first time reactions to this show and my previous videos on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.